Right now, you probably have a to-do list. Maybe it is on your phone. Maybe it is scrawled on a sticky note, or maybe it just lives in your head. That low hum of tasks and obligations and things you have not gotten around to yet. Work, errands, messages to reply to, plans to make. You are busy. You are always busy. But here's the thing. For almost all of human history, that list did not exist. And the real answer to how your ancestors actually spent their days is stranger, richer, and more unsettling than anything you have been told. You have probably heard the word survival. You have probably imagined ancient humans as frantic, desperate creatures sprinting from predators, scrounging roots from frozen soil, and collapsing exhausted into cold, dark caves. That is the story. That is the image burned into the cultural imagination. But the actual anthropological record tells a completely different story. One that might make you feel uncomfortable about the life you are living right now. Anthropologist Marshall Solins called them the original affluent society. He was not being poetic. He meant it literally. In his landmark 1966 paper, Solins calculated that hunter-gatherers, like the Hakchu-Kungsan people of the Kalahari, spent roughly 3 to 5 hours a day on what we would call work. Acquiring food, maintaining tools, doing the practical tasks of daily life. That was it. The rest of the day was theirs. 3 to 5 hours. Think about that for a moment. You are not comparing that to a vacation. You are comparing it to a baseline, to a default. Your ancestors, your actual biological predecessors, worked fewer hours per day than almost any modern human alive today. And they did it without alarm clocks, productivity apps, or the quiet anxiety that comes from knowing your inbox is full. So what did they do with the rest of their time? They rested. Not the guilty kind of rest where you check your phone every 40 seconds. Deep, genuine, physical rest, the kind your nervous system was built for. Anthropologist David Sampson at the University of Toronto studied modern hunter-gatherer sleep patterns and found that groups like the Hadza of Tanzania typically sleep in 2 distinct phases, waking for a period in the middle of the night, often to sit together quietly or talk by firelight. Your body still wants to do this. Researchers call it segmented sleep. For centuries, Europeans did it too, before artificial light rewired the night. They told stories. This is not a minor detail. This is perhaps the most important thing they did. Polly Wiesner, an anthropologist at the University of Utah, spent decades with the Kungsan and noticed a striking pattern. During the day, conversation was practical. Food, tools, logistics. But once the sun went down and the fire lit up, something shifted. 78% of nighttime talk was devoted to stories, narratives about people, distant places, spiritual encounters, and the lives of ancestors. Wiesner argued this was not entertainment. It was infrastructure. Storytelling was how ancient humans maintained social bonds across distance, transmitted values, and built the shared mental worlds that allowed large groups of strangers to cooperate. Every time you get pulled into a novel or lose 3 hours in a film, that is the same mechanism. It never turned off. It just changed channels. They played. Adults played. Not organized sport, not structured recreation, genuine play. Games of chance, mock hunts, dancing. The Hadza are known for singing and dancing into the early hours of the morning, not as ceremony, but as pleasure, as a thing done for its own sake. There is a growing body of evolutionary research suggesting that play in adults is not a leftover from childhood. It is a biological need. It maintains social bonds, rehearses physical skills, and regulates stress. Your need to play did not disappear when you turned 30. It just became harder to justify. They made things. Not because they had a quota, because making things, shaping flint into a blade, braiding plant fibers into a basket, decorating the handle of a tool with a pattern that served no practical purpose, was satisfying in a way that is written into the human reward system. Archaeologist April Nowell at the University of Victoria has studied the cognitive complexity visible in Upper Paleolithic art and concluded that ancient humans were not just surviving. They were expressing. They were creating things that had no survival value and doing it with enormous care and skill. The cave paintings at Lascaux are not primitive. They are breathtaking. Someone chose those walls deliberately. Someone mixed pigments deliberately. Someone stood in flickering firelight and painted a horse in motion with a precision that took time, attention, and love. They were bored. And this is an important point. Boredom is not a modern invention. It is an evolutionary signal. A neurological nudge that says the current situation does not require your full attention, and you should probably explore, create, or connect instead. Boredom precedes curiosity. Hunter-gatherers experienced boredom, and boredom pushed them toward the behaviors that made them human: experimentation, play, discovery. The moment when some ancestor picked up a piece of ochre and drew a line on a cave wall was probably preceded by a stretch of profound, restless boredom. You are not meant to be stimulated every second of every day. That feeling of nothing to do is not a failure state. It is a feature. They grieved, they held funerals. At Kafse Cave in Israel, archaeologists found a burial site roughly 100,000 years old. A child interred with red ochre, shells, and antler horns arranged deliberately around the body. This was not accidental. Someone lost a child and could not let them go without ceremony, without marking the moment. The grief you feel when something ends, the need to ritualize loss, to gather people and say this mattered. That is not a cultural invention. It is ancient beyond language, ancient beyond the campfire, ancient beyond almost anything else that makes you human. They argued. Hunter-gatherer societies were not peaceful paradises. The ethnographic record is full of conflict, over resources, over relationships, over perceived slights and shifting alliances. But they also had sophisticated social technologies for managing conflict. The Kung practiced a form of dispute resolution where the community would gather and talk through a problem publicly until it resolved, not through authority, but through collective voice. The ability to sit with tension, to say what is true in front of others and be heard. That need is still inside you. It is why silence from someone you care about feels like punishment. It is why being talked about behind your back feels worse than being confronted directly. They raised children together, not in isolated nuclear units, but in overlapping networks of care. Anthropologist Sarah Hurdy at the University of California, Davis spent years building the case for what she calls cooperative breeding. The idea that human children evolved to be raised by many caregivers, not just two: grandmothers, aunts, older siblings, close friends. The village was not a metaphor. It was a biological necessity. The exhaustion you feel as a parent trying to do this alone is not weakness. It is a signal that your nervous system is running a program that was designed for a larger support system than the one most modern societies provide. And they were, in a way that is almost painful to look at directly, present, not in a mindfulness app remember to breathe way, in a structural way, when you have no calendar to look at, no future obligation to dread, no past transaction to second guess. The present is simply where you are. Your attention lands on the texture of things, on the people in front of you, on the way the light moves. Research by Matthew Killingsworth and Daniel Gilbert at Harvard found that the human mind wanders from what it is doing roughly 47% of the time. And mind wandering is reliably correlated with lower happiness. The wandering mind is a forecasting machine, built for futures that have not happened and pasts that cannot change. Ancient humans had futures and pasts too, but the machinery of constant digital distraction that supercharges that wandering did not exist. So this is what ancient humans actually did all day. They worked a few hours, they rested deeply, they told stories by firelight, they played and grieved and argued and made things for the joy of making them. They raised children in networks of shared care. They were bored and curious and present in ways that modern life systematically erases. And tonight, if the noise dies down and you find yourself staring at nothing in particular, not scrolling, not planning, not producing, that is not wasted time. That is the oldest version of yourself coming back online, waiting for the fire, waiting for the story, doing exactly what humans were always meant to do.